La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Benvenuti. Welcome back to La Lanterna. We're doing a little bit more of a break here and there because it's summer. But hey, Matt, welcome and happy to see you again.
Yeah, right. It's been a minute. I know the summertime is always kind of that depressing time of the year where it's not depressing, but it is kind of depressing.
It is. I'm counting. It's 38 days without Genoa.
Yes, the sun is shining. It's actually, the weather's been kind of
No, it's not. It's raining, pouring rain here in Toronto.
Yeah, it's been like weird, like cold weather somehow for us in New York as well. But anyway, point being, whether you're enjoying beach time or not, we're all missing some football. And so we're kind of trying to fill the airwaves as much as we can. And we wanted to do a little bit of an update on at least the rumors that are out there and some of the comings and goings that we know about too.
Well, before we get to that, and yes, absolutely yes. Before we get to that, I wanted to say congratulate both of ourselves for a full entire season of Serie B. So in theory, it's almost like if we're wrapping up our first season, because if you remember, we started at the tail end of the season before that in Serie A. We had like 3-4 matches when we started April-ish, end of April.
We probably got it might have been 6 or so matches actually.
Fair enough, but in a sense, like we were at the tail end, right? Yeah. Then we probably, because we were so on up and happening about the summer, and even though, and that's kind of where I'm trying to get to, is like with the 777, we've got used to starting from the January of the previous year. So what are we talking about? Not this January of 2023, but January of 2022.
That's crazy.
When we still haven't started our pod, essentially that the 777 are very secretive. And in a way, I'm disappointed because based on the fact of Preziosi was like all the names and whatever everywhere. But at the same time, I'm like so pleased because everything is secretive. And if you look at the names, Goodmanson, Frandrup, and all the Dragosino, or even what not, all those names that we've got now so attached to, at the beginning we're like, who are these people? No one even ever guessed that we were hefty. We were even close to them, but then we got used to them, and then we don't want to get rid of them.
Yeah, I mean it's been a really strange last couple of years. I guess we're no strangers to seeing players coming in and out of our club like crazy, but especially I feel like since 777, you had a lot of more, I don't know if this is true or not, but it felt like we had a lot more kind of international unknown type players that came in, and you start to learn them a little bit more, like Hefty and Goodmanson and some of these other guys. Frendrup was also in that category. And then you start to feel like, all right, this guy, he's part of the team. He's part of the system. And so, yeah. And now this is like kind of maybe the first real full season. I'm sure that's where the 777 group are feeling, in terms of they came in, like you said, in January when the team was in complete disarray. They had to make a couple difficult decisions about the manager, bringing one on and then letting him go, some forced decisions with some of the players and how they were handling that. Obviously, all the budgeting things happened last summer. So that was the big talking point back then, was the debts are cleared. How are we getting rid of the dead wood?
Are they cleared though? No, not yet.
Well,
as they said, it'll take a couple of years.
But right, we have the path to getting that done. So like that was kind of the first big sigh of relief.
Actually, let me add to that. Recently, in the past 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more, but more or less, 777 has officially, quote unquote, officially, no, nothing, quote unquote. They have officially sued the former owner because of hidden agendas and certain things that he has hidden and so on.
Wow, they sued Preziosi.
Yep.
That's kind of wild. Okay. Well,
So we'll talk more about it once things get unfolded, but I just wanted to share that because we were talking about what the new ownership and so on. But we know how fishy, how weird, how dirty. Now I'm going to use the word really quote unquote dirty. Preziosi was because we were used to him, and which was not a good thing. And a lot of people got used to Genoa being associated not to Preziosi, but to be that dirty type of team. And now we have to get that word out to say, hey, no, you're going to see it by yourself, so you can hear me or not. But essentially, the club has changed.
It's been a really a lot has happened in a couple of years. That's definitely true. I think like as fans, obviously we've seen a good season. There's definitely like a bigger vision and something that we're going to see a big test next season. This is like the Serie B, of course, was a major test in and of itself, but we will probably talk about this in much greater length. We have an ownership group that doesn't exactly have a great track record with managing teams. You look at what happened with Sevilla in La Liga. You look at what's going on with Vasco da Gama. They go in and buy Hertha Berlin. They're
wait. Let me add to that. Seville won the league, the Europa League. Vasco, it's at their first year in the Serie A because they call it Serie A also in Brazil. They have won the last match. So there's perhaps first experience is not necessarily their first sort of, I don't know, focus. I don't want to downgrade it to our, if anyone from Brazil is listening to us or Vasco da Gama is listening to us. But I'm sure they're not interested to Vasco da Gama to go down. I heard that they're going to do some investment also for their, what we call our winter market is going to be their secondary market after, the start of the season. Hertha Berlin, it's not because of their incumbency that they went down. They were already down at the bottom.
No, yeah, of course. They bought them after that had happened. But I think we have to be also real honest with ourselves with this too, because the rose-colored glasses are going to come off this season, whether we like it or not. This is a real time. Hopefully it's going to be another good moment in what we see for the ownership group and the club progress and everything. We see that positive direction. But I think there's a balance with this too, where there's been good strides. We've had a good season. We had a lot of great moments for us as Genoano and watching the team progress. But look, this is going to be a really interesting test to see what happens and how this model works. What are we actually going to do to compete in Serie A? We're saying really bombastic things like our goal is already mid-table and we've not even been back up yet. Like there's a lot of stuff kind of coming out there. And so, this summer is going to be pretty pivotal because we have obviously some really great players that we've seen. We know we need to add to the squad, and how we go about doing that, I think, is going to be a really big thing. We think we've got a great manager in Gilardino. We think we have some good youth players.
So to confirm, I can't remember now if we said it last episode now. 2 weeks. I can't remember what happened 2 weeks ago. But anyways, Gilardino has been confirmed to be the manager of Genoa. So that's something that a lot of people, a lot of journalists were actually mentioning, is he going to sign? Is he not? And we got a confirmation also from his agent that it was never under discussion. It was just about confirmation about what was already dealt with, because with the promotion to Serie A was an automatic renewal with Gilardino. So there was, in the books anyways, in the lights of the club, it was never a doubt. But the funny thing that I noticed is Gilardino is our manager. He started very silent, quietly, starting actually, let's go even further back from our Primavera. So from the youth, the farm team. And then once Blessin got sacked, he got called up as an interim. And we didn't know what that, I mean, we knew what that meant, but essentially we didn't know how would that last. And it was almost to go all to the end of the year. Positive outcome from Gilardino's results were fantastic. And slowly, even back then, people didn't even realize the quality and the quantity Gilardino brought to the team, to the point that this guy was so exhaustive of understanding, analyzing, and thinking about all the analysis and quality and thinking and strategy. This guy's a genius. He did not win the best coach of the year for Serie B. Unfortunately, they gave it. I'm not the one to comment on this one, but they gave it to Ranieri. Nothing against him, but nothing against Ranieri. But from a Gilardino and Grosso, because I'm going to also talk Grosso about in a second, but I think these two were way better. What's the word I'm looking for? Better, I guess, contenders for this trophy or title. And Grosso, he did not even get confirmed from Frosinone. So in my mind, it's almost like it's a negative aspect from Frosinone's perspective next year in Serie A, because they don't have a coach yet. But that's a different story. And especially after 2-3 years, we talked about a few episodes ago, where in Serie B, the length of a coach was quite thin. Up until 2 years, he was the oldest long-lasting coach. But anyways, no confirmation for Frosinone. But we are going on with our Gilardino, which is what we're interested in going to talk about.
Very important. Yeah, there was obviously rumors of him going, I think, at one point to Fiorentina. There are other things, some people clamoring about, are we going to be able to keep him? And I mean, to your point, like, we saw a definite positive change in the squad and how we kind of had found our formation and our
mentality, right?
Yeah, I think it's mentality. I think like a lot of it came to and I'm not going to speculate why he didn't win the award, because I wasn't a person that chose that stuff. But like, where Blessin had us wasn't in peril or total disaster, but it was definitely farther from where we thought we were supposed to be. And his introduction kind of helped solidify the proper way to line up for most of the season. We had a pretty clear formation. It wasn't so rigid that was the only thing we were doing every match. We had changes to it. We had relatively flexible positions, especially in defense, if I recall, throughout a lot of the games where you had kind of these changes in formation and shape over time. And so you can clearly see that this is a manager that's putting a lot of time in understanding the game and trying to work our players. And I think we're hopeful to see him take the next step in Serie A next season. Obviously, like, again, for everyone, just about everyone in the squad, this is going to be kind of a new test, even for some of the players that were in Serie A before we dropped down. But you've got a manager who really brought this squad together. We're going to have some continuity in the ideas and the ways that we should be building on this squad and how to work well with the pieces that we have, which is really not something that we've had the luxury of for a little while. Because remember, Ballardini, when he came in, was kind of a stopgap replacement in a way, and he stuck around for a couple of seasons because he did a pretty good job. Then he gets let go. Then we let go of Sheva. Then we bring in Blessin. Then that turnover happens. So this is one of the few times where we've seen it already, at least in this past half of the season. It's pretty clear where Gilardino wants to be. How do we make that as best as possible with this team?
Oh, that's true. And to add to that is essentially where he started, like in the as we say in Italian, in sordina, which means like a little bit on the backstage, quietly started, and now, and I was looking at this pod, or it's not really a pod, but he does lives on Instagram, and then he posts on YouTube. His name is Carlo Danani. So shout out to Carlo Danani. He's probably one of the few journalists that I appreciate where he's actually telling you the truth rather than telling you a fib. This word fib I always love to use in a sense like that essentially it's a lie because you don't know and you're just making the momentum. But he doesn't, and he tells you the truth. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is like I was watching his live feed today, and he was saying how Gilardino started very quietly and not really. He didn't appear to be like this very imposing figure and whatnot on Genoa. And now the question around with his partner, he was talking about with his wife, he's talking about with Laura, and asking to her, like it was an interaction between the two, saying, how heavily is he involved within the Genoa market, transfer market? They both had their own opinion, essentially saying that he started very slowly, not impressed, not impressive. Sorry, not imposing, and so on, to the point of arriving that being a very important figure. And I think together with Ottolini and Spores, I think Grosso, I think Gilardino has a very important say, to the point of what we're about to talk about, which is the market today, the transfer market today, of what Genoa is about to embark. Now, let us not forget that we are only seeing things now. The transfer market is only officially starting, so you cannot deposit, contracts until the 1st of July. But we cannot. No one can officially, otherwise than announcing we got them, but it's not officially done yet until the 1st of July. And up until then, what we heard was a lot of voices from Gilardino saying, I need this, I need that, and I need that. And most of the focus from these journalists are around what Gilardino has said. And the first one I'm going to open up, if you don't mind. I guess we can start with because it's the very few. So I'm going to kind of connecting back to what we said, that the 777 partners are not really open. So Spores and Ottolini, and I love this in a way, even though I miss certain rumors from the past of not knowing much. And the only one that is, I'm going to use the word very cautiously with everyone, and I'm sure you're going to agree with me, Matt, but semi-official about the only one that we know about, which is called Aaron Martin, left back from Mainz in the Bundesliga.
Yeah.
Left. He also does midfield,
like a left wing back.
Similarly to Criscito, essentially, right? Free transfer. Transfermarket values him as 7-8 million. Free transfer, so that's an amazing deal for someone that played in Mainz in the Bundesliga, which is definitely, as we talked in the last episode, it's definitely not a league to underestimate. Even though the last rumor just from today or yesterday, whatever that might have been, people are talking about. So again, it's not official until we put the signature and deposit into the Lega on the 1st of July. People have seen certain pictures, which I don't know if it's speculation, but it's also in the English world, not only in the Italian world, about him having been seen him in
Werder Bremen. Yeah. And another, not in Werder Bremen, but where that stadium is, and potentially doing a medical and all sorts of things that are there. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a weird situation right now. I mean, about Aaron Martin as a player, pretty young player, I think around like 26 years old. He's had some phenomenal matches for Mainz over this past season. As you mentioned, he has like a kind of fun attacking quality, which we know that's kind of one of the places, as you mentioned, that Gilardino really emphasized this season, was having that kind of support on the forward progress perspective from our fullbacks. And so this is a player that fits that bill absolutely. He had a pretty good overall season for Mainz, and still in like a good kind of age range and everything else. There had been rumors maybe he stays in the Bundesliga, maybe he doesn't for some time. There was a thinking, which is partially why I think there was some rumors of him with us. I think there were some connections. He's a Spanish player. There's some connections that maybe he would play in La Liga. But there's generally a thinking that he may not return to the Bundesliga, despite some rumors from Frankfurt from a few months ago. And now all of a sudden we see him in a total surprise moment at Werder Bremen in their stadium. And everything about this, we just have to emphasize, I think from the get-go, has been a lot looser maybe than it seemed or had been reported. And even this specific thing seems pretty loose. You've got a local paper saying it looks like we saw basically a picture of him with like a team bag or something at the ground. And it's not even like a picture of him like head on. It kind of looks like him. And there are rumblings and rumors that he was there to have a medical. Nothing official from the club, nothing official from the player, nothing official from any of their contacts. None of those things have been out there. But obviously kind of curious if that's the case, that you see that player doing that specific thing in Werder Bremen. It's possible that he's going to sign for the club. It wouldn't be totally surprising. They had a pretty decent season campaign themselves last year in the Bundesliga, and obviously he's got experience there. But it would be a little bit of a bummer, because this is one place like we know.
Shout out to Stefan, by the way, that he also shared this.
Yeah,
quote unquote. Is this news? Is this real?
well, Stefan can speak even better than we could as a Mainzer. You would have seen him in many matches last season and what he had done. I'm really only speaking from my basically fantasy Bundesliga perspective for most of what I know from him. But Stefan
being our former guest that we had a while back now.
And current We Are Genoa chat member. So, but yeah, I mean, look, this is a position. If it's not him, we need to find someone else. I think we all know this. We have obviously Payach, who's one of the guys who's going to be here. I don't think
he's definitely coming back. Haps. Okay, that's another question. That's another thing to talk about. Yeah. So, what do we know about Haps? Haps, we knew that at the end of the loan season. Now, this is all, again, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit about it, but this is essentially all rumors based on journalists that are being the newsstand type of selling you whatever they want to sell you. But the word was that they were going, Haps, after the loan, he was going to go back to Venezia because it was a straight loan, or maybe there was a buyback option, but was not going to be exercised based on the fact that maybe too high or not too high, because obviously we're going to always be looking for a deal at the end. Then the next step after that was Haps may be coming back with an exchange with Aramu, because we were a little bit disappointed with Aramu's performance. And after that again was, okay, Haps is not coming back, and Aramu might be going back to Venezia anyways, because we are still disappointing about the Aramu. So this is just reinforcing how much these journalists are just like rambling about shit that they don't even know what to talk about. But so essentially what we know is Aramu's in our books. What's going to happen about him? We don't know. We're going to talk about it shortly. Haps on the books is there is no intention right now. Or better not. Let me say it differently. His buyback has not been exercised. So, other than Payet, after almost,
which is not a good sign, really.
After Payet, after almost a whole entire year of injury, so you cannot rely on a player after 9 months of injury. We have seen some good things about Haps, but again, similar thing in a shorter form because we got him on January. We saw him like for 4 or 5 matches, super enthusiastic, and then gone for the whole entire rest of the year. Anyways, so left back, Aaron Martin from Mainz would have been is or would have been, depending on the outcome, a great buy.
Yeah, and for anyone, if you're a little bit curious, this past season he featured in 28 Bundesliga competitions for Mainz. He had 5 goals and 3 assists, so that's kind of part of the attacking prowess that he's had. Like you said, if anything, like look, he seems like a player that could really slot in well with what Gilardino is trying to do. We know we're going to be really, really thin there. We don't need to remind any listener that we're not going to have Mimo back just because he's retired. So that's another one down. Seems like Haps is probably out. His loan officially ends in 3 days on June 30th. We didn't exercise the option to buy, so you think he probably does not return. We have Payac, as you mentioned, he's coming back from injury. We have Sibora, but it seems like there's never really been a firm place for him. So now this really kind of critically important position, we don't have an answer for yet. And so this is, I know maybe it sounded like I was being a little harsh earlier, but I think we have to be realistic here. Like when you look at their properties in their early days and early voyage from an ownership perspective, there's not really been a ton of successes. I think this Genoa season is really the main one that has happened. And this is an important period for us from a club perspective, nonetheless, their operating model perspective, to find solutions that are really going to work for us. Because if we go into this season and we have some middle ground solution because we couldn't execute the right deal or we couldn't convince someone else, I think it's going to be a tough one to watch if that's how we end up filling a lot of these players. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think a lot of Genoano are probably watching with, I personally think, a healthy dose of skepticism is what we do in the transfer market this summer.
Yeah. I personally have understood now over a year that about 777 that they're not, even though they might have made a couple of mistakes, but you have to give them the benefit of the doubt with respects to I'm talking about the coaches, benefit of doubt of first they wanted the impact of coming in, which sounds almost like what Sampdoria is doing right now, but that's a different topic that we might be talking about another episode. But so I'm gonna give them a pass on Shevchenko first arrival, fine, great, whatever. Then they get Blessin. I think it was the great man for the locker room at that point. I agree with them having to start with Blessin in the new year in Serie B. It didn't turn out well, and then we got Gilardino, which was the best choice anyways that could have happened. So maybe it was just a thing to happen to happen, something to happen anyways. Having said that, I up until now, except in a transfer market, and I think that applies to all the teams, and I'm talking about even the big sisters. So even when you look at Juve, Inter, Milan, and so on, they do get major players, and we're talking about big targeted numbers and tag prices on certain players, and not necessarily all of them work. Even look at Lukaku, and I'm not talking about Inter himself. Even when he went to Chelsea, he was like a whole issue for them, and especially for how much they paid for. But what I'm trying to say with this was 777, except a few numbers, like out of 10, I'm going to say 7 or 8 are fantastic. And even then, and I'm more or less thinking about Yeboah, he still has a lot to prove.
You really think 7 or 8? That feels like
less.
Goodmanson, yes. Friendrup, maybe.
Who?
Friendrup, maybe. I mean, remember Friendrup?
Absolutely, yes. Like a lot of people would kill to see him go.
With Fabry, he barely played in our starting 11 under Gilardino. Like
No, it's
he's a
true,
bench
but
player in
he was
Serie
definitely
B.
a stronghold in our midfield, even though not necessary from a starting 11, but he would be always like a. I'm not disagreeing with you, but he's not a bad player.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, look, he was a fan favorite in the year we went down because he seemed like the only guy that was out there trying hard, and actually making some tackles. But that's not an indication of where we should want to be as a club. Like that's great, but and again, he got displaced by 3 players that are on the 2 of which at least are on the pretty wrong side of 30. And I don't want to be overly critical because there's a lot of talent there. But you look at Strootman and Badel and obviously Sturaro, players up in their age a little bit. I think Frendrup's a fine player. I would not say he's a rousing success. Hefty has had a really good potential. We both believe in him, but again, we're not building statues for this guy right now.
No.
So,
but he has also had this huge injury that we know it takes a long time.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, you have to be fair to these things, but I think that's kind of the point. Is like we've really not seen a lot in a long period of time, and it's because it's not been a very.
Well, Dragusin was another one.
Dragusin was a good one.
Martinez was another one.
At least Martinez was another one. Both these.
That's why I'm saying. What did I say? 6 or 7 or 7 or 8?
You said 7 or 8, but I'll give you a pass. I mean, I get they're guys.
So
but again,
good. So good.
I still think like it's not wrong for Genuano to be a little negative looking towards the season next year because
we've not learning about this Muguno thing.
Yeah, I'm embracing it. I'm embracing the Muguno at this point. Like I know I butchered that pronunciation, but like, look,
it's fine.
We have seen an excellent Serie B campaign, and that's a good thing. But I think if we were to see anything less than an excellent Serie B campaign, there would have been mutiny. It
started to be okay. Then
if that season ended how it started and we finished 6th, there would have been all sorts of shit happening.
Oh, big time.
And that wouldn't have been technically a horrible season. We finish in the playoffs or something. We don't get promoted. But that's kind of my point. It's like we did the job. We had a great season. We all enjoyed it. There are a lot of players that should feel proud of themselves. Players played well. They made a good account for themselves. But we're stepping into the spotlight now. And so...
Well, yeah, we were more in my opinion, we were more in this. I mean, we're both in a spotlight for different reasons. I guess the spotlight from the Serie B perspective was more, was more like, okay, you guys have to be the top of the league, which it didn't end up being that way or close enough anyway. So at least it got fixed with after sacking, unfortunately, because we still like him. Good guy, not necessarily the right person, unfortunately, to our goal anyways, bless him. And then Gilardino came and that he made the difference because since he came, if you look at the Serie B numbers, since he came, Genoa would have won, the Serie B league. Having said that,
it was the point at the beginning. Yeah.
Having said that, Grosso we don't know yet where he's going to go. Pirlo, copycat of looking always for something from Genoa. Anyways, I mean, this is our point of view, but obviously,
I think this is Radrizzani showing his ass before the season even starts. This is why he got basically chased out of Leeds with pitchforks. Like this appointment to me is fucking bonkers. I don't know if anyone could look at themselves in a straight face and say they're excited about this. Like the player manager transition is not something that always carries out. In fact, most cases it doesn't, and very rarely it does.
Look at De Rossi. Look at Cannavaro.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of great examples. Thierry Henry fell flat on his face when he's trying to manage Monaco. Like it's happened.
Good example.
And
Pirlo, just to give a little bit of background, he started with Juventus, which he did barely the minimum, thanks to perhaps like I'm guessing the background of whatever was left from before him, which was what, Sari, and the amount of the quality of the players because of him, because of the team itself. He did barely close to nothing. Maybe he won the Coppa Italia. I can't remember, not because I don't really care about like La Signora, or what we call i gobbi, the hunchbacks. But but and then he went to Turkey. He did whatever, nothing excellent, nothing excellent. But anyways, obviously Radrizzani. So we'll have a different episode to talk about Sampdoria, but Sampdoria never went, unfortunately, or sorry, never went to bankruptcy. They got saved right at the end, at the tail's end, by this individual called Radrizzani, and I can't remember the other name because he's like almost like a ghost individual. But they apparently purchased. Again, we'll talk about a little more in depth at a different episode. But apparently, they got 50% of the team, or a little bit more than that, where Ferrero still has the remainder 50 or 49 or whatever that percentage might be. And so they got saved by bankruptcy. First rumors not too long ago were about Grosso, so we're like, oh wow, so Grosso just won with Frosinone, but apparently then he turned down that offer, saying it was not something that he would have been interested in because it didn't give him enough guarantees. To the news of if not of today, maybe yesterday at the most, about Pirlo being that he accepted this role for Sampdoria.
Yeah, there was lots of rumors about Grosso coming in and being the Sampdoria manager. I mean, it's a roll of the dice. You're right. I mentioned in the group chat, it feels a little bit to me more like Sheva than it did feel like Gilardino in terms of the appointment. I don't want to be completely unfair to Pirlo. Like, obviously, this guy was like a total, of course, as a player, he was one of the most phenomenal players we've seen. He was an absolute joy to watch. One of the just famous footballer.
Player,
right. You mentioned his brief kind of managerial career. This is why, for me, it just screams Shevchenko. He managed for basically a season at Juventus. He did win 2 trophies, give him that. He won the Supercoppa Italiana, which kind of doesn't count because it's a single game. And then he did win the Coppa Italia.
For who doesn't know, it's the winner of the Serie A plus against the winner of Coppa Italia.
Coppa Italia, right. They did win the Coppa Italia against Atalanta 2-1. They were knocked out in the Champions League by Porto, which was a pretty poor result in the round of 16, and they finished 4th in Serie A that season. In a season they really should have probably won the whole thing. So from a Juventus perspective, it was not a successful season. He gets dismissed at the end of the year. He joins Karagümrük and manages actually a few former Genoa players, or actually current Genoa players, on loan. In Turkey, yes. And their season was fine, I guess. So I didn't know much about this club, but looking at their performance the last couple of years, the season before this one, they finished in 8th place. The season before that season, they finished in 8th place. This season, they finished in 7th place. So did anything really change? They actually lost more games this year than they did the prior few seasons. So maybe it was a more tough division. I don't know. But you're taking a total swing and saying the players are going to respect him because he's Andrea Pirlo, and I'm sure there's an element of that that's going to happen. But
and the cute thing, sorry, again, I don't want to talk too much about him, and we're going to end it here, I guess, because we're going to talk a little bit more one of the next episode. But Pirlo in English, also actually in Italian, or more so in Milanese, means idiot. Or I mean, people are gonna even say more about it, that I'm not missing out on a whole bunch of what it means. But if you say "sei un pirla," you're an idiot. Pirla or Pirlo or whatever, so it can use a lot of funny words. Anyways, I've seen a lot of comments from Santoriani, and they're like, "Well, I'm not that happy, but okay, that's well. He's our coach, so we're gonna. Oh, well,
Don't you
of
remember
course.
that
What are you gonna do?
feeling? Don't you remember that fucking this is exactly Shevchenko. This is 100% Shevchenko. We were like, I guess the Ukrainian national team has been okay, so he's probably and yeah, shave a goal, I guess.
Hey,
Like we had no idea what to do, and we just knew that
hey,
we needed to do
listen.
something.
God forbid he's gonna do an amazing season, and he's gonna like thrash Serie B.
Well, look, if that happens, I'll tip my cap to him. I don't. I'm not. I have to now. Maybe this is me not being as whatever, like as an American fan. Pirlo's one of those figures in football where you kind of don't usually want to root against him. I'm now forced to do that because he's the manager of Sampdoria, but like otherwise, like he's one of those guys, you know, it's like no Pirlo, no party, like the whole like wine colored boots that he used to wear and that all that bullshit. Like people love that stuff. But now he's the coach of Sampdoria and I fucking hate him. So that's how it goes.
All right. So let's go into the nitty gritty now. So what we wanted to talk, all this, like what, half an hour that we've been rambling about it, was about to talk about
details.
Who's in the roster coming, going, versus also the loanies coming back. So there's a whole bunch of, we're talking about the numbers or the rumors I've heard were that there's at least 18, and I'm not talking about the Primavera or the youth teams. Obviously, I'm talking about like more of the senior team. About 18 players that we need to place somewhere. So these are the numbers that they're trying to aim to. So let's go one by one. So these are the returning loans that were sent out, and we what's going to happen, our comments on what's going to happen, because do we really know at this point? Nothing yet, because we said that officially the market starts on July 1st, and then we don't know. Okay, Vasquez was sent out on loan, straight loan to Cremonese. For what I know, tell me anything else that you know anything different, Matt, but from what I know, he's going to be returning to Genoa. Obviously, he's going to be part of the retreat. So, by the way, the retreat is going to be in Trentino, different area compared to before, which was in Austria, not too far compared to where we were used to the last 5 years, more or less. But this time it's in Italy. It's in Moena, former area where Fiorentina used to train. But it's in a great area. Why they go there? It's because they're up in the mountains. The air is a little bit thinner, so it's a lot better pressure on the players in order to get better outcomes because of thinner air. So Vasquez is going to be. Sorry, say it again.
Good for the muscles.
Yes. So Vasquez is coming back from Cremonese. He was a straight loan to Cremonese last year, so I'll keep him there. Out of his request, and he's definitely going to be returning and going to be evaluated by Mr. Gilardino to understand if he needs him or not. More or less, his role is center back.
Yeah, I mean Vasquez. I think this is a guy that we all really, really liked in our last season in Serie A. So it's interesting to see how he's going to kind of come in and play, right? Because like we've talked about a lot over the last several months, our biggest strength is really his position. It's a challenging thing for him. He obviously had top flight football last season. He's still a regular kind of featured player internationally, which again doesn't happen as often for Genoa players. He's been, I think he got called up to the Gold Cup, which is an important competition here in North America. He generally makes Mexico's roster wherever they go. He doesn't always start, but I think a lot of times people are actually calling for him to start more often, especially with some of the defensive mistakes that have been happening with El Tri and what's going on with the Mexican team. But, you know, interesting because we've got Mattia Bani, we have Dragushin, as you mentioned before. He could play if we're looking at more of a back three formation and what's going on there. And that definitely is not at all out of the question with how Gilardino might think to line us up next season.
That's true. It'll be quite interesting because do we know what really is going to happen to Bani next year in Serie A? Is he important? Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, do we really want to rely on Bani starting to be an aging player in the back and whatnot, or just being a sub-entry type of coming in and replacing? I don't know. It's an interesting to see what they want to focus on, because what we've learned, and we love to have learned this, is that we're going to rely on youth talent, but also with the support of great senior players.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of that's the model for success for us, and I think I would expect probably right. You'll have the old guard getting most of the time, but we're going to need rotation. We are hopeful. I know our Coppa Italia draws maybe. It's not an easy tournament based off of how they have it formatted and everything else is set up. But
don't go there. Don't go there.
I know, I don't want to pick that wound, but what I'm trying to say is, at least for a little bit, we're going to have a second competition to focus on, which I don't think we're going to completely write off. Even
okay,
though,
sorry, I'm thinking about it. Let's, for the sake of discussion, let's explain why Coppa Italia is horrible. Well, so if we want to compare it to the
FA Cup or something,
yeah, exactly. You go on.
I mean, it's so imagine you're doing the FA Cup, but it's like March Madness style, and teams with better positional placing in the top division get buys. Like the whole thing kind of feels like it's unfair because you have lower level teams that are really fighting for the Coppa Italia positions. And this was a fun part of the season last year for us too. Remember, we had a couple of games against fellow Serie B teams, originally against Pescara or maybe Benevento and then Pescara. I think it was Benevento. Pescara were not in Serie B last season. Am I making that up? Do we even play them?
No. Pescara was not, but Benevento was.
Yes. Anyway, it was fun in the early rounds of the Coppa Italia last season. Then we look at our next opponent after winning a couple of relatively manageable games, and you're playing against Roma. So I think that the reason why this competition feels unnecessarily kind of slanted towards the top teams in Italy, which it would be otherwise anyway, is because those top teams don't ever have the risk of playing multiple rounds, really. Like they're not playing in those earlier round matches. And yes, it is true, if you are a student of English football and how the FA Cup is set up, there are definitely later rounds with which top flight or the top four teams anyway play, because you have even like the more kind of grassroots levels that starts at that kind of position. And so it's not like, they're playing every single possible round of the FA Cup if you're a first division team, but you are playing teams potentially in the third tier or the fourth tier, and you're going on multiple weekends and multiple rounds rather than
is that two-legged?
It used to be set up in that way, depending on how the outcome would turn out, but in most cases it's not. So
in England, right?
No, in most cases it is not two-legged. So,
and is it in the top leagues home, or is it in the lower teams home?
Most of the time, and this is another thing. So this is also part of Coppa Italia, as you're saying. So the kind of better placed team is always the home team. And it's a totally needless, in fact, very backwards setup. And this is what, if you remember that we were talking about this on the group chat, the famous Jose Mourinho kind of comment of like, this is the worst cup in European football. This is the worst competition in Europe.
It is.
And it is that way because of basically two things, to say this succinctly. The small teams never get a chance at that amazing draw. You never have, we're going to welcome one of the best clubs in the world, one of the best clubs in Italy to our ground, and we're going to be proud. And the cameras are going to be on our team for this period of time. It never happens.
Never.
And instead, oftentimes, you're also looking at a lack of interest from these bigger clubs. So you're playing in these giant stadiums that are not always filled, that have a lot less intrigue for them. And it just takes so much air out of it because you don't have that special aspect of like, this is Italian football. Even playing like, even having, this is one tier below, but imagine Milan visiting Como or something. There's a different element of that than Como traveling to San Siro and playing in front of the fans that are there. So you don't have that aspect. And then the top level clubs basically let the other teams kind of fight, and the remaining challengers, they play. And what ends up happening every single season is that you have pretty much all Serie A teams in the quarterfinals, semifinals, finals. And you take away that dramatic element, and it's overplayed because, of course, if you watch the English tournament and some of the other ones that are out there, the quote unquote magic of the FA Cup is kind of something that exists for a finite period of time. You almost always are seeing the really, really, really big clubs lifting that trophy at the end in England. But you still have rounds where a third tier club or a fourth tier club, or technically a non-league side, advance to a next round. They knock off a team that's 20 places above them. They knock off a team from the first division. You never know how it could work out. And that's what makes it fun. And that, plus just like the quantity of games that are available and are on offer. And when we come back to another major gripe we've had of how Italian football is sold, this is another real sticking point, because like, I'm here as a football weirdo in America, but I will sit down and I will watch. It's one of my favorite weekends, the earlier rounds of the FA Cup. I don't know any of these teams very well at all beyond their name and maybe their colors, but it's not like I follow them or anything. And you can just go from game to game to game to game to game, and it's literal March Madness style action, but it's for football. And you keep flipping around, and one game's on to penalties, another game is they might go into extra time. Like, you have these other things that are happening, this wild drama. You can kind of see the scores and see what's going on, and it's really, really fun. And you see also like the crowd atmospheres and the different grounds, and just this real representation of the game in that country. And it is sold with its own partner to different distribution groups across the world. In the US, we have ESPN that pays for it. But they sell this separately from the Premier League all over. And these clubs are still making money off of this. And it's just not something.
See,
Coppa Italia is bundled with Serie A
Serie
and
A.
Paramount Plus. But like, if you actually had real interest to this thing in those earlier rounds, think about how much more marketable it could be.
We know that the issue, I mean, at least you and I know that the issue lies around the Lega Serie A bundle, that whoever's managing the rights for the TV rights. And unfortunately, being that there are dependent, not independent, but dependent with Serie A, it's the same people. And we already have the issue of Serie A being, marketed around the world with a certain amount of price, hence the difference between Serie A compared to EPL. Right. Not to mention Coppa Italia is like, close to nothing. If not, perhaps mainly only something interesting. If you remember, and I'm quoting him just because he's a good example of your standard person, our first guest, if we go back in our days, today being episode 55, maybe this would have been episode 1, because we start with the episode 0 or the pilot episode, which was Sean, my colleague, Juventus fan. And he was saying, not necessarily on the pod, but with my, when I talked to him, he was saying, Coppa Italia, who gives a fridge about Coppa Italia in Italy or in general? Or at the very most, you're starting to be a little bit interested in the quarters, definitely a little bit more on the semifinals. And at the very most, you're looking at the finals, and then you don't even care anyways. Whose fault is that? Well, definitely whoever is marketing it, because that's how you give that momentum and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I think marketing has a role, but I think that the actual structural way that this competition is set up is
Agreed.
and it's, obviously, like it's the same pretty much in every competition these days. Everyone wants to be champions of Europe because of the prestige that's going on with that. So a lot of the big clubs, like, really, it's the league and the Champions League, and those are the main draws. And in England, it's the same. You have clubs that don't always take the competition seriously, but you still have those really, really big moments, and you still have those talking points and those things where you can kind of pay attention. And, the answer, the rebuttal to that question is, well, pretty much any other club that's not a top 6 club would really want to advance and have a great Coppa Italia run. But like, in the way that the format is set up, it's just really not very feasible for those clubs to do a whole lot without having like a really significant upset in basically 4 successive rounds. You're asking a mid to lower table Serie A side to beat pretty much a top 6 side in the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals in order to win the Coppa Italia. And I think part of what the fun and the drama of this is, you give those smaller clubs a chance. It's obviously not really the best club in Italy. That's what the league competitions are for. You show that over the course of a season. You can't be lucky for 38 straight games. But these cup competitions are fun because anything can happen. That is football. And you give a club a chance to win a trophy that maybe they wouldn't always win it. And you have that extra added tournament level style of football, which has a different dynamic to it, because that whatever happens at that game is the end.
And Matt, I'm going to have to add to the fact of the fault of Italy overall, where they've always sort of advertised, even at home, so meaning in Italy, that Coppa Italia was only interesting if the big sisters were in it. So hence why I mentioned before the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and so on, because it would be only interesting if it was Juve Inter, or if it was Milan, I don't know, Roma or whatnot, so Derby d'Italia or whatever they want to call it. It's like, honestly, no, that's not what Coppa Italia is supposed to be. That's maybe the league can be interesting because of that reason.
Right.
And Coppa Italia, to your point, should be all Italy, all leagues, Serie C, Serie B, Serie A, all together equally. And, we can talk about it forever, but essentially.
Really, the drama in the last several seasons has been like, oh, is Atalanta going to win the Coppa Italia? Is it going to be Lazio? And like, I think it could be bigger than that, because it's not just about those clubs that are kind of they're pushing up against those top 6 clubs, and they've got an opportunity to maybe take the competition a little bit more seriously, or whatever you want to say. But Roma had a chance to win.
Like, listen, when we saw Cremonese arriving all the way to the semifinals or something like that,
right?
That was amazing,
right?
And I don't care if in Italy they wouldn't even watch it. I think that from a Coppa Italia perspective, that was beautiful to see a team that actually got relegated to arrive all the way to that level.
Right. Well, and that's what it is. Like, this thing should be something where we're looking at the Italian game as a whole.
Exactly.
That's what makes it. You look at a map of all these Italian clubs, and you can say what you want to say about Cremonese, but look, this is a side that was in Serie A in the 90s. They're a weird side, but there's all of these teams like this. There's Foggia. There's all these like teams from all across Italy that are nowhere near the top flight these days, but have some sort of history to them. Vicenza, like all these others. And why are we not celebrating that part of Italian football? Why is it only like the clubs that have the biggest draw all the time?
So I'm going to give also a fault to myself, and I even know or hear, and I don't know enough. That's why I'm giving the fault to myself enough about it. There's like a Serie C Coppa Italia. Like, seriously, why? Just like, let's just do a fair, to your point, and then we'll drop it here, but a fair, we're not the ones to decide this, but obviously it would be a good thing to reassess the whole Coppa Italia. And that's the point of this conversation that lasted probably too long, but nevertheless. Anyways,
We're supposed to do a short episode today, by the way.
what's that?
We thought we we're gonna have nothing to talk about. It's gonna be a short episode.
There you go. We always have something. Yeah. So let's go back. So we were talking about Vasquez. For sure, he's coming back with respect to at least to be analyzed to see if we need him, if we're going to be using him, or if we're going to send him out on a loan. Another one, Ternana Casata. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, obviously there were some feelings about the celebration and some of the other things that happened.
Don't confuse him with.
No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking. Yes, that's right. For me, a lot of the players that we're getting back, especially players that we had loaned to other clubs in Serie B, unless we really look at a player like Casata as, he's a younger player, there's development opportunities, there are these other things. So I would say Casata, and I know that I am not even necessarily exactly on point with his position here, but just bear with me for a second. And let's say we believe Casata is kind of in the same category this season as maybe Jagiello was last season. Where he had been on loan at Brescia. He had a good season. We're looking for some depth within the squad. He's a relatively young player, so we want to keep him on. That decision makes a lot more sense when you're in Serie B when you're in Serie A. And so I don't know exactly how we fit him into our plans. I think we could look to maybe do something where if he's not going to have a position with us, do we find another Lecce or someone else that might take him and see if he can get experience in that type of a way and see if he can still grow. But I think we might be better off parting ways probably with a Serie B club that's looking to really push for promotion. Probably we get €1 million, €2 million maximum from the deal. But it's more than we have, and we're not paying the players' books, and we can put that towards a bunch of different things. So there are a fair bit of players that kind of fit into this category, I think, where, look, I don't have any ill will against Casata. Of course, I think he's also someone whose career is not at all shut. But for what our ambitions need to be next season, it's difficult to justify him unless we really have budget to kind of keep him around and have a good space for him to develop, because that's my other concern. I don't know where he would ever kind of slot into this team right now.
No, I actually almost agree with 100% with respect to the fact that we've had him in Serie A before. We have not had any type of positivity. I can't remember what his length of contract is. I'm guessing at least for another 1 or 2 years at the bare minimum. With this stems from, again, him and many others are stemming from past legacy from our previous ownership that we kind of have to pay for and whatnot. But you're right. I think that Casata, personally, I don't think is on the interest of wanting to keep him. He definitely has a market on the Serie B side. From that perspective, from there to be able to sell him, if we were able to sell him, that would be great. If not, I'm sure there's a lot of teams out there, Ternana may be included, that can still want to have him on their books. So having said this, I'm trying to say, he's coming back as a loanee. Do we want him or need him? Most likely not.
Yeah. I think that's it.
So next one is Galdames. Same for Cremonese. This was another one that perhaps could have been interesting, but got loaned out. What do you think? What do you think, and what do you see about him?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was slightly surprised that we let him go on loan last season. I thought that this maybe came down to player conversations and us. Maybe he did not want to go down to Serie B. I'm not exactly sure. So when you think about market value wise, so I was a little bit off in my valuation of Casata. Is probably more in the range of €700,000 to €1 million. Galdamesh in about the 2.3 million range, at least if you believe the transfer market kind of statistics. Player that has obviously a little bit more pedigree playing in Serie A. I felt like he was a useful player when we were in the league last season. The space is crowded again in central midfield. I think the potential here, we're going to need legs for sure. I think we're going to need to have rotation, especially if we plan on getting significant minutes out of Badal and Strootman, which, by the way, it sounds like in the rumor bin, Strootman is closer to becoming confirmed, although has not happened yet. But I don't know. I would be more open to us bringing Galdamesh back. I don't know if there's going to be first team minutes for him all the time. I think it would also be a relatively fair decision to say, let's move on. Like for me, like the biggest thing, and here's where the Galdamesh thing is more complicated for me, because I saw bits and flashes of him in Serie A where I thought this is a good player. There are other moments where it was kind of not there. I would be most concerned about if we're bringing him on for squad depth, that's fine. But what happens to a player like Lipani? You know, what happens to these younger players that are in a similar position that we think have talent, but they need experience and they're pretty raw? Do we really want to focus on Galdamesh, who's still young, by the way? He's only 26. He's not completely over the hill. But do we want to invest our time and our roster spot on a player that we know is probably not going to be ever a regular starter for us, rather than put in a player like Lipani, give him real chances of playing and really test him, and have that kind of space available? Because I think otherwise you kind of just have him around for insurance, which isn't a terrible prospect. Honestly, we might need it if players get hurt. I just kind of think it seems to me we would be better off trying to bring more players from our youth system and giving them at least a chance. I'm not saying we're going to put a bunch of Primavera players in Serie A and that's how we're going to win football games, but if they're not getting those moments to play, they're not going to really develop anyway. You know, they can't.
No, I like what you said. I like that insurance word that you used.
Yeah,
Like
he could be good that way.
I think he definitely is going to be differently, but similar to Vasquez. That he's going to be coming back. He's going to definitely be evaluated by Girardino. Is he going to be a starting 11? Definitely not. That was one of the reasons. So one of the reasons why we weren't keeping him was, one, because we had the over influx of central midfielders.
Yeah, Strootman was probably took his spot a little bit.
Exactly right. Not to mention Frandrup, or not to mention Sturaro, not to mention Badel, and so on. Right.
Right.
So why not give him out? So the question was, compared to Casata was given to Ternana, while Gadames was given to Cremonese. Cremonese in Serie A, Ternana in Serie B.
Correct.
So that could be the insurance player that you were talking about with respects to, maybe let's evaluate him. He's a Serie A player, not a starting 11 necessarily, but he could be a great, fallback for the second liners, the benchers, whatever you want to call it.
He at least has Serie A experience. I mean, it's really
starting 11. No,
it's been right. It's been with us in Cremonese, so it's not. It's he joined in 2021 for us, coming from Vélez Sarsfield, which I think you for a moment actually was not really kind of directly employed, but anyway, yeah. I mean,
if I remember well, he was a free transfer.
Yes. So it's tough. I mean, I think like squad depth is a good thing. I generally would like to have us have more youth representation in those places, but at the same time, also, we can't have our backup defensive midfielder all be like 20 or 21-year-olds, because I think the likelihood that either Strootman or Badel or Sturaro or even Frendrup get hurt, that's just why I'm a little bit concerned, because like you put Frendrup in the mix, is Jagiello going to play in the same position? We want to have Lapani come in. And it starts to become like, I personally, maybe again, this is bias. I don't really remember Jagiello as much in his Serie A exploits, but like I kind of would lean more towards Jagiello than I would Galdames.
Similarly, but different, right?
They're also different players too, to be fair to your point.
Good that you mentioned that. Jagiello, we have confirmed and extended his contract. So that's a very important factor that you mentioned that. So Jagiello is one of the, like, people are looking at transfer market for new players.
Right.
It's also important players that got confirmed. So Jagiello, with his extension, gives you the continuity and the interest in continue with this player.
Because I think like now it starts to become a crowded room. We have literally potentially, I understand Jagiello is a little bit more of a flexible player. We've played him in a lot of different places, but we have potentially 5 already central midfield players on the lineup in Frendrup, Jagiello, Strootman, Sturaro, Badel. We've not talked about Lipani yet. We've not talked about Galdames. So like now you have maybe 6, maybe 7 of those players in your squad. And I just don't know how we're going to justify that. And I think the only other answer is going to be, do you loan out one of these players? Galdames is an interesting one for us, I think, because I don't believe, and I think this is the right decision, as much as it maybe sounds like I was bashing 777 earlier. I would be surprised if we really spent a lot of money in the summer transfer window. I think we'll bring in new players, but I think we'll be pretty prudent in terms.
We'll get to that. That's still a far away. There's like different rumors, different comments. You're right. I think that it's interesting.
But my point is, a player like Galdames is an interesting one, and not very many of them we have, in that he has top flight experience. He's young-ish. He's not approaching 30 or past 30. And from a market value perspective, purely, 2.5, 2.3 million euros, something like that, is a really significant amount of money for us. So you sell this player, you do lose that squad depth, you do lose that opportunity. But I think at some point we got to bet on our youth. We have to bet on the work that Gilardino has already done, and we've continued to see happen since he's joined as our head coach in what is going on in the Primavera, and trust that the Primavera is going to be that pathway to get more players in there. Because if we can't leave space for that, those players, they're gonna go elsewhere. So,
and we know that thanks to Gilardino, as he has shown us so far, the youth players are definitely going to be an important integrity of our future anyways. And that's also based on different interviews that we had with 777.
And this is beating the dead horse, and I think as an American phrase, and kind of like an obvious thing to say, but this type of a decision is, it might sound funny that I'm so focused on what we're doing with Galdames, but like, we are also signaling to other youth players throughout Italy how we're thinking about our youth program. And I think that's important because, we're not a club like a Juventus that has an enormous amount of resources or has quite exactly the same type of prestige. I'm not saying at all there's no prestige with Genoa as a football club, but it's a little different, obviously, with the top clubs. But if we are a club where our value proposition is, we have a really good youth system, we have a great set of coaches, we are investing in our Primavera team, we have a great training ground, you have a chance to really rise up through the ranks. You're not going to be a youth player that's competing with $30 million signings every season, because we can't afford to work that way. We need to build organically in order for us to be competitive in this league, because our budgets are not going to compete with the most, wealthy clubs in Serie A. So you have a chance to grow your game, get regular playing time in our Primavera, and have a meaningful chance at having playing time in Serie A, and really demonstrating your abilities under a coach who won a World Cup for Italy and is one of the more famous coaches that everyone knows by name. And I think if that's something we can actually deliver on, you might see more players from other youth systems say, Genoa is starting to figure it out again. And that movement from the youth systems doesn't get talked about all the time, but that can be really beneficial to us down the line, because now we have players that are coming through our system. And if we're giving them that space to get a couple of minutes at the end of a match, and you want it to obviously more than like some throwaway extra time minutes, but if you're getting that experience, all of a sudden now you're giving people a real way of saying, I can grow my career here. And hopefully we keep them, but even if we don't and we sell them on, we'll be way better off for it.
Absolutely. 100%. Next one, Meligoni.
Meligoni, this one's tough too. I mean, I know this is like an unpopular opinion. I kind of liked Meligoni when he, but he was just very not. He was not a guy that we saw a lot of real consistency from when he was wearing the shirt. I think when we loaned him out, everyone was kind of like, "Thank God."
We were expecting the number 10, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the profile of this guy. So this is one where we were curious about how the 777 model is going to help us with our kind of team and what's going to happen. And here's an exact example of that. You have a player who goes to Standard Liège. This is obviously a club that 777 own, one of the more famous ones in Belgium. And, he scores a goal in his time, has 21 appearances, 1 goal to his name. Of course, playing in more of a central midfield position. So we're not evaluating him like a striker. A goal is not exactly the be all end all for by any means for him in his position. But I would be a little surprised if we decided to bring him back. Let
me add a curveball to that one. We have analyzed him with the past ownerships, the past management, including Blessin. He left before Gilardino came, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, there's potential.
I'm not saying I want him. I'm just saying.
I guess my hesitation is if you look at his past season at Standard Liège, he was occasionally a starting player, but not always did he feature in that way. There were a couple of times he came off the bench for a few minutes and had a couple of performances. In fact, towards the end of the season, in their last, I think just about their last at least 8 or 9 games, he started maybe one of them. I can't claim to know the full details of this. Maybe he had a little bit of an injury towards the end of the season. But there aren't a ton of games where he played close to the full 90 minutes. And I don't follow Belgian football that well. I can't say with any real accuracy how well he actually really did do at Standard Liège. But if you just look at a cursory level at the numbers that he put up and the performances that he had, there's nothing here that screams to me like this is a real talented potential player. And yeah. I get that he's had, a lot of drama to deal with here at Genoa. I understand that, coming in when he came in 2 seasons ago was probably the bad idea, but I can't say anything more than, like meh from this guy. So I don't know. I think it's another interesting one because I'm not sure if we can recoup as much. I would be more, I think we would be better off trying to keep a player like Galdames than a player like Meligoni.
It's interesting because he was definitely one of those potentials on the under 20, under 21.
Yeah, right.
But it's one of those talents that kind of like got dissipated. Perhaps like I read a few comments and I don't disagree with this. Like a lot of players make a difference based also on their manager. So depending on who you go for. So I'm almost like reaching out to all of these youth players. Don't look at necessarily at the club aiming for the top. Aim also for that coach that will emphasize who you are.
Well, I mean, that's definitely important. And I think I trust that Gilardino, when he's analyzing players to keep and go, that he's actually like meeting with players. He's seeing their skill set. He's understanding what they have to offer. And you're right. Maybe we are all pleasantly surprised and Melagoni becomes a player we thought he was going to be. And, you know, to your point, he had a couple of under 21 caps and all these types of things. But this is another one that's like, do we just take the 1.3 million and move on?
Yeah.
I kind of feel a little bit like that might be the way to go. And probably it's better for him too. Like, does he need a change of scenery? Does he need a really firm, solid plan on what the next couple of years looks like? Does that help him? You know, maybe it does.
Next one up, we have Calo. So he was a loan to Cosenza, obviously coming back end of loan. What do you think? Another midfielder.
Yeah, I mean, but I think these guys all are kind of falling in the same bucket. I know Calo was really important actually, for our friends at Cosenza and their fight against relegation. But it's, for me, I think it's a little difficult to justify.
Again, we're talking about a player that the peak of his value was 750,000 euro.
Right.
And this was back when it was at Pordenone. No, yeah, Pordenone. Then he went to Benevento, and then we got him from Benevento in 2021. But nevertheless, I think this is one of those players that they're trying to evaluate him and sell him, and you know, one of those, at least under Preziosi, that was trying to market him, I guess, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, look, all these guys, a lot of these guys are really, really young. I think like the natural thing to think in this case is like, do we sell him to Cosenza? Is that kind of like the best pathway for him? He gets playing time. He's already had success there. I think we're more likely, I think, to find also an intrigued buyer in that way. And I just think we need to think about our squad a little differently now that we're coming back into Serie A.
It'll be different, and I'm sure that 777 know what they're doing. I'm not saying that we are the experts, but I'm sure that based on experience that they're gaining, based on the experience that they had from previous experiences, they ain't no dummies. So far on the prospect of players, they haven't shown, in my opinion anyways, like that a major issue. Next one, I'm just jumping to one to another, but sorry about that. But Andrea Favilli.
Yeah.
We want him gone.
Yeah.
Can I say that?
I jumped the gun on this that we were talking about. Favilli really was the celebration. That was kind of what set us off in that match against Ternana. But yeah, I don't know how you take this guy back in when you celebrate like that after scoring a goal.
You can't. He's a striker. He's 26 years old, if I'm not mistaken. He's not as tall as you, but he's still quite tall. 191, 1 meters and 91 centimeters. I don't know how much is that in inches, but that's almost that's six and something.
Yeah. Like
his market value is about 1.4 mil euros, of course.
Yep.
He played in Serie B with Ternana. He, to your point, what you just mentioned before, he did that super enjoyful momentum. Sorry, it's like whatever. Anyways, very unprofessional if you think about it. When you see a lot of talented professionals that they are formerly players for whatever their experience they had before, you never cheer when you score against your especially not only your former team, but your team that you're still under. Nevertheless, Ternana, Serie B, second tier, I think he has a lot of potential to be sold or loaned out in Serie B. I don't see him to be a potential to stay with us.
Mm-hmm.
Next one, I guess there's not much more to talk about. Anyways, after that one. Anyways, Yeboah. Yeboah is one of the few, in my opinion, that Serie 777 have
Not done.
not necessarily like.
I think you can say it. It's not been a success. We thought that Yeboah had, obviously he's got the pedigree. We thought even at the beginning of, remember he scored the opening goal for us to start the Serie B campaign. But look, beyond a pacey partner for Calabeciban, we've not seen as much from him. And I think no one was really fussed when we sent him out to Augsburg. They didn't pick up the opportunity to buy him. I think
well, mind you, that to his defense, he had a major injury that wrapped up most of his seasons too, right?
He had injuries that he's dealt with, and he's not been a stranger to that stuff. But I don't know how you really offload him, because you kind of just need a team that's willing to take a chance and throw a dart at this point, because there's not been enough proven games, I don't think, where it's been, this is what you're going to get from Yeboah. But this one is a clear-cut option for me. I would be pretty surprised if he's on the books at the start of the season.
Well, he's definitely going to come back in with us, and he's definitely going to be, I guess, evaluated by Mr. Gilardino. We're hungry for strikers. We're going to get that in a second. Hopefully, we're not going to take 5 hours to finish this conversation, but this is one of the hot topics about a lot of journalists, at least from a Genoa or Genoese side, about Genoa hungry and looking for these strikers. And he could be, again, not necessarily our starting 11, but maybe Gilardino might decide that he could be our next one as a backup after whomever that might be, Piontek or whatever that might be. I guess it's stay tuned to see what they're going to decide about Yeboah. That's, I guess, how I see it. Another one less important, not necessarily, but another midfielder once again. This is more of a youth one. He's 21 years old. His name is Michele Besaggio. So he was loaned out, strangely enough. Usually it's the opposite, or sold out. We actually loaned him to the Juventus under 23. So that team that stays in Serie C. So how did it go with him? It went okay. The value of his market is slowly increasing. I guess it started around 200,000. Now it's 300,000. So nothing major. I guess he's still young. He's a midfielder, 21. He's not shining. Otherwise, at 21, you could still be, at top flights. See, I'm just looking always at our example of different midfielders that we had in the past. But
well, I mean, you can see some later bloomers in Italian football too. But I mean, this is a guy I kind of think has. You're right. Maybe we try to get him. Hopefully, someone in Serie B or a loan option feels maybe like an interesting option here to see if we can try to get his value up a little bit. Can he find a good?
You're right. Yeah. So if you put him in Serie B, it'll definitely be a different experience, a different exposure compared to a Juve Serie C under 23. 100%. Obviously, he did not shine to the point that Juve wanted to buy him. So I'm guessing he's definitely one of the ones to be coming back. Not necessarily. I mean, mind you, not necessarily. I don't know. He could still be under evaluation for Mr. Gilardino. We don't know. Last but not least, for the coming back from the loans perspective, is Yaya Calon. While, so forward, more on the tendency on the right side, while I will be missing him just because of his history, being on the fact that he came from Sierra Leone as a kid, fostered by a family and managed to grow up from the very lower ranking teams from Genoa all the way to Serie A, and now being loaned out to Verona. Part of his deal was to be loaned out to Verona, but the clause was that if Verona was going to stay in Serie A, there was not a right to, but actually they were forced to buy him out. So essentially, he's not coming back because Verona has to buy him. So thank you from with respect to Calon. Great kid, great enthusiasm, contrary to what I've seen personally compared to Yeboah. Similar background with respects to where the roots are, but with respects to the quality of personality and so on, Calon hands down was a gentleman with respects to that, without being cocky at all.
Absolutely.
So we could go on forever about topics and so on. So let's look at the current roster and decide who might stay and who might not. So we know about Martinez. There was a right to buy back from Red Bull Leipzig, or I don't know how it is.
Leipzig. Yeah.
Leipzig. Okay.
Yep.
So that was announced quite actually one month ago, or not, from Martinez himself, saying that he is now officially a player of Genoa. So we're super pumped about that. And he is, hopefully, after the enthusiastic season that he had in Serie B with us, he is going to be proven to be another great player, great feat. We've seen a little bit of issues at the beginning of the season. Samper came into a couple of games after that, but at the same time, we've seen a growing career of Martinez to become like our, I don't know. Sure, we had a great defense, but such an amazing goalie that such a great goalie that he's looking towards to be. Samper, the rumors are that the player, rightfully so, has asked to be to want to play. So last rumors have him cited with Como. So he's definitely a goalie that is definitely projected towards Serie B. Nevertheless, he has asked to be playing, so we can expect him to be sent out, whether it's on loan or sold out. So that means that we're definitely looking for another goalie, which I might have a scoop with respects to a goalie. So rumors have it that we might have hands on a young player from Canada, by the way.
Okay.
He's still like in the early stages, so I don't think he is like the player to be for our second player, like the second goalie himself. But just because we were talking about goalie, sorry. But his name is so he's from Canada, as I mentioned to you before. His name is Andrew Romano, so obviously from an Italian background. He's probably 18 years old, but it seems like we have possibilities to grab him from the age. So it looks like he could be like a Primavera potential, but nevertheless. Wojciech, which was our previously third goalie. Not too sure what happened to them, because up until 2/3, 4/5 of the season, he was our third goalie. Then out of the blue, Agostino,
Yep.
which we saw him in the last match against
Right.
Bari, which was amazing. Actually, his experience there, that substitution where we had Cristo coming in
Mhm.
and Agostino coming in for Martinez. Anyways, so Wojciech, I'm not too sure what's going to happen with him. While Agostino, I think based on that exchange, means that they're definitely going to have him even more and more focus on him. Anyways, defense, Sabelli.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look defensively at the players we have. I mean, I don't know. Is there anyone you would think that we, barring maybe Sabora, that we
Won't
would
go to him yet. Sabelli.
because I think Sabelli like is a yes. I know a lot of people.
You're right. Let's do a parenthesis.
Like
Our back end has no flaws. Can we say that?
because you can go, yeah. I mean, you could go one by one with each of these guys, but it's kind of like Hefty. Obviously, he's got the Serie A experience. We think that he can become a better player and showed sparks. Sabelli, maybe there's the question marks in Serie A, but he was such a critical player for us last season.
Critical, and probably one of our best defenders. Independently from a lot of people, don't think that he was that great, but ultimately, because of the passion, because of the not quality itself, because of the passion, because of the, I guess, persistence, because of the where would you want to add to that?
Well, I think he was integral to how Gilardino wanted to kind of set up our team. You know, we needed a
you're right.
winger who's capable of and I know people have rightly called him out for some of his corners and sometimes his crosses, but he's had some really good
piede quadrato.
Yeah, but and maybe some potential risks from a defensive side of things, but it's just like very odd to imagine him not being part of the squad next season. Because of how important he was. Again, this is another player. He's 30 years old. He's not that young, but it's hard to imagine him not being there. We talked about Pajac coming back. I think Pajac is another guy. So at the beginning of the season, it was those two were the guys that were really making it happen for us. They're both around the same timeline. They're both in their 30s. Pajac obviously have a really big injury. You know, it's maybe a little bit less market value we can get for him because of how often he's been out this past year versus Sabelli being really like an iron horse for us and starting just about every single game. I think you could make an argument, and I could understand it, that neither Pajac nor Sabelli are quite Serie A material. My response to that question is, who are we going to sign and how are we going to sign them for less than 10 million euro? Because I think like at the absolute very least, we need these players as options. Even if they're not starting players, they're players that understand the system. They have capability going forward. I think Pajac gets a bad rap sometimes for his passing and his defensive abilities. I think they're better than it looks. So it would be kind of a surprise if we let either.
Listen, he was part of that Empoli that also did wonders too, right?
Yeah, right. So I think there's a good reason for hope on this side. The only player I would circle out of this group, so we've not really talked about Voyako. I think there's question marks with exactly what's going to happen if you're looking at Vasquez, Dragushin, you know, Bani, all players kind of in the same place. For me, like the two players, and they're both in the same position that you kind of scratch your head on is, you know, with Vasquez coming back into this group, what happens to Voyako? In my opinion, he's kind of indispensable. I think he had a very, very, very good season. Possibly some of the biggest tackles of the season we saw him make. Still very young player, only 24 years old. And then you look at Alan Maturo, who signing for the future, he's 18 years old. Actually
19? No, he's 18. You're right.
So, and obviously he played in the under 20 World Cup and started every single match, including the final.
And he won the second best player.
Yes. So the quandary here is kind of similar to what we were talking about before in my imagined Lipani scenario, where you've got a player like Maturo. He's a player that I don't think he featured actually. Did he play more than 10 minutes for us last year?
Yeah,
I think he played like a short substitution maybe, but
couple games at the most.
This is a guy that has talent. So immediately you would think maybe we loan him. Maybe we get him some experience where he can play more regularly, but it's also kind of a curious thing. Do you throw him out in the field for Serie A? I'm not exactly sure about that, but if you believe he's talented, if you believe in those match ratings for the under-20 World Cup, if you believe in his ascending market value, which isn't really gangbusters, but it's still 2.5 million, then maybe we need to find an outlet for him to still have the spotlight. Because the biggest thing is like, you can't have this talented player just withering away on the bench, and we don't have a way of getting him in to play. So, and Voyako, I think, has proven his worth as well and what he's done. So I can't imagine a dressing room that does not include him. Just
So,
because of,
I guess to recap about the whole defense, because we're doing rightfully so, like a little bit faster in order to lump them all together. But Sabelli, I think he's definitely going to be considered. Actually, if not considered, even like considered mostly to be, if not the, definitely not the starting 11, but for sure being part of the squad. Hefty, I'm sure, based also on the previous purchase rationale to definitely include him in our Serie A, and that's where we saw the best Hefty last year in Serie A. Payats, we definitely can only ensure his return based on the fact of his few games that he has showed us to be that rightfully so left back that he needed to be under the whole entire spectrum of what we wanted from a left back. Hence wanted to have Criscito back. Bani, definitely we will be keeping him. We'll be seeing him in the starting 11 often, probably not. Sibora, that's the question mark with respects to, we still have one more year with him. Are we going to be able to put him somewhere, or we're just going to have him as just your player backup in the event of something, in the event also of Sabelli not being able to play? Vogliaco, that's a good point that you brought out about him. He's definitely going to be a full type of approach of, I think, based on Gilardino's aspect, he's definitely going to be considering him. Il Sanker, we still have one more year with him as well. I don't know. I think he's more of, with respects to trying to see like a backup Serie A, because he's experienced and whatnot, not necessarily the best. We've seen good ups and downs. I don't know.
I mean, Fabry, I think this is one where we got to let Il Sanker move on. I don't know how we do that, because we just kind of brought him on, but
1 year left. I think it's either it's going to be an agreement on both to leave, part ways, or just keep in the event one of the 3-4 centrals are injured, because you still have to factor that in.
Yeah.
Maturo, you talked about him. He's definitely going to be one of the players that could be considered, being that the second best player of the under 20 FIFA. You can't underestimate him. Genoa, being that they're going to be focusing a lot on youth, not only with the experienced players. I guess Gilardino is going to factor in the fact of considering him or send him out again for 1 more year on a loan. But nevertheless, he's definitely one of the project for the future. Last but not least, Dragozin is definitely one of the ones to keep.
Yep.
Last but not least, about Dragozin, rumors. I think it's more about rumors than anything, that Napoli wants some sort of I can't. I'm trying to remember how to say this, but essentially, some sort of like a clause in the event they want to buy him after the first year of Serie A. I think this is one of those silly things. I'm using silly like very cautiously, not to use like a very strong word. The word type of approaches that certain journalists are using, because personally, it's either you want to play him as a team in order to focus him to be sold eventually, or you're not gonna keep him from and say, okay, hey, listen, Napoli, you have the first bites about him, and then it's yours if he works in Serie A.
Yeah.
So midfield, Torre, one of the mysteries of the whole entire history of the one of the last signings of Preziosi.
Yeah, this
He has
one.
been on a free ride for the last 2 years, because we've seen them maybe even less than Maturo, and Maturo is like on the spotlight, but Torre nothing. Seems like he might be going to Paris FC, but these are again what I've seen on the newspapers, which means close to nothing.
I'm sure he's out. I don't know how we can justify a roster spot for him. Maybe send him to Sampdoria. They're
just send him to Sampdoria. Who cares?
Pirlo knows him from Karagumruk. I shouldn't say that. I don't. Again, we just didn't see very much from him. It didn't seem like something where we got a lot of playing time from him. So that's the thing, is like we just don't have space. We've not seen that kind of real need.
Now, mind you, that Gilardino's perspective with the 3-5-2, as if that was them. I mean, he's obviously not going to focus on a 3-5-2, but obviously the main core is the 3-5-2 with other aspects. If it's a 3-5, quote unquote 5, that means 2 to 3 centrals. Torre will definitely be a good person to keep in with respect to any backup emergency and whatnot. But to your point, Jagiello, next one, we talked about him already. He has been confirmed. Frendrup, no need to talk about him much more. We just bought him like last January anyways, but positive aspects from him. Lipani. So wrapping back to our youth, I think personally next year we're going to see a lot about him. Not necessary only from a starting 11, but definitely we'll be seeing him a way more than the 3-2/4 appearances that we have seen him this year.
I mean, it's expectation. I think it's, but this is why all these things are so important, because we have so many players in the same position, and you're talking about, we barely saw him in Serie B. Now we want to see him a lot more in Serie A. Like, how are we going to help this player make that adjustment and play up? I'm with you. It feels really strange to imagine him being loaned out. And I do think that there's going to be a priority to get him to play more often. But it's going to probably be something that presents itself, and maybe not as a regular of a thing until we really start seeing good performances from him.
I want to see like a new Rovella, essentially.
Right.
Next, 2 seconds gap, but I'm going to talk about him anyways because he's on technically our books, is Portanova. So Portanova, essentially, until that personal life thing that he has been going through, I'm not going to talk more about that because we covered it. And I don't need to talk more about what he has done or not done until it has been on the tribunal perspective has been decided to what's going to happen or not. Until he has been proven not guilty, he's going to go through that aspect, and we don't know what's going to happen. I do not remember actually what his contract is. I'm thinking he still has 1, if not 2 years left, but nevertheless, I can only hope that is he a Serie A material? I don't know, honestly. Personally, I don't think so, but I don't know. But ultimately, if he does get acquainted, I don't know. Let's see what happens. Sturaro, you mentioned him before. He has just apparently, I'm going to say apparently because, when journalists talk about things, you don't even know if it's true or not lately. So seems like he have found a deal, and I'm using the word, you can't see me, I'm using these quotes on quotes, deal to stay one more year with us because his contract with Marseille has finished. And obviously, that means that if Genoa wants to keep a very seasoned, yet also very important player, especially for our race towards the Serie A, as he has done the lavatrice, how we called him in Italian. I don't necessarily understand why they use that analogy, but lavatrice means like washing machine. I guess he goes there and like, I don't know, gets them and kills them and just moves on. I don't know. I'm going to skip one player and I get him to a second, but the next one, so Badel, we know he was like one of the best midfielders of Serie B. We know almost for certain. I guess when you talk about renewal, that's official. There was an officiality about Badel that he has signed one more year, and that was under the command with respects to the fact of desires of Mr. Girardino. And he was, again, just repeating that because it's very important, he was considered one of the best midfielders, if not the best midfielders of Serie B. I'm going to go back to who I wanted to talk about before, and this is a little sore point. So Sturaro, why is Sturaro not having been confirmed yet? So his contract was towards an end for this year. So that means that if he was going to be playing again with us, that he had to do an extension. So if he hasn't been doing an extension, means that he was not agreeing, on his wages. So if you were a captain, if you're claiming to be, this Genoana that you were to be, you were either going to say, sending me out. Well, I'm actually, my contract is ending, so I'm just going to look for somewhere else, or shut up.
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. Like, this is a guy that is pretty important for us last season. He's never really made it, I think, in a Genoa shirt in the way we thought we would, or maybe even his career in general. Obviously, he played for Juve, and the one of myriad players we've had that at one time played for Juve. But hopefully this gets resolved without too much additional financial might from Genoa. If it doesn't, maybe this is more of an argument for saying we can carry the load and keep more guys on because we have one more spot open.
Exactly. Forwards, not a little less compared to the midfield. So I guess the hot topic right now in Serie B is Massimo Coda. So while we talked about, we're going to keep him for next year, he's not going to be necessary in our starting 11 all the time, but at the same time, he's going to be our senior player to be helping and, the new talents, or, sub-entry with respects to the 80th or 70th or 90th minute, whenever it's needed. Seems like there's like a hot market in Serie B for him to be. Similarly, what happened also in Lecce, they were newly promoted, and they had no issues in letting him go and not keeping him in Serie A. Is that going to happen also with Genoa? That seems what it might be based on the journalists.
It's so hard. I mean, the Lecce example doesn't obviously bode as well for Coda himself. I'm not sure we're exactly in that same category because I think we are very dependent on some really skillful forward play. And of course, we saw Coda as much or maybe more so, an assist maker for us this past season. So, and we've talked about that a lot of times. I think it's a miss from the squad if he leaves. I'm definitely more in the camp of keeping him for the sake of I think it's a two-pronged thing. We need to have some continuity in our attack and how our chemistry is being built between our wingers and our forwards, and maybe even our attacking midfielders or central midfielders. But I also worry a little bit, like if he goes, then who comes in? How are we going to replace this? We don't really seemingly have enough to go out and get somebody new. I know there have been rumors about Piontek. I think there are a couple of things that are pretty light rumors, but consider the fact that, of course, Hertha have gone down. Piontek, I'm
Part
sure,
of the 777. So that's the only reason why they're
777,
bringing him in my opinion. There's nothing more than that.
he's not the same profile as Coda. He's a different player. He's not having as many good seasons in the last several years. In fact, it's unbelievable to think that, wasn't it like literally 2017 or something, like the last time he played for us? That's crazy to me. Like 6 entire seasons ago is when this guy.
That's what I'm saying. Like everybody's like raving about, oh yeah, let's bring him back in. He's a striker. What has he been doing? Not like, forget about the last time he was doing like so many goals. And to your point, 2017, 5 years ago. And he only stayed with us for 6 months under Ballardini, right? So under that manager for 6 months, then he went to Milan. He didn't even do what? Squat with them.
Barely.
And then the year after, he started to do nothing.
Yeah. So, I guess like one of the considerations is if they go for that, if they think that's the right move, then you have to figure out, like, are you going to pay Coda and Piontek, like how you budget the salaries? It's a risky proposition. I think I would prefer that we keep Coda, that is. But I think the only justification is we get a reasonable offer from a Serie B side, which I think we probably would. And we have a player we can sign that we think is at least at the same level, if not more additive for Serie A, then you probably do make that decision. But it's still, it doesn't come without risk. That's definitely for sure.
Aramu.
Gone. I don't know how, but
some people talk about he's a great
of
guy.
all the players, this is the one that is, like, I think the most affirmative. I would rather keep Toure than keep Ramu.
It's interesting how you say that, because a lot of people are talking about that he is great for the locker room. Like, he's a great individual, hence slash on slash, like, sort of thing, like how
Great for
Sturaro was, how Criscito was, and so on. But I don't know, Ramos, like, if you look at also like social media, like a lot of people hate that, but social media also gives you indication of what's happening in the background, right?
Yeah.
So when you see when you see Aramu in certain pictures of certain players and their weddings or not weddings and whatnot, that gives you an indication of how close they are to certain players.
Mm-hmm.
And the power that they have also in the locker room. So that's not to be underestimated. That's all I'm trying to say.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to break up a locker room if you don't have to.
That's right.
But I also think that, like, we need production from a player of his level, and it was sorely lacking. It seemed like he was disinterested a lot of times, and really, like, from when you think about a weakness, it seemed destined for that to be the case. If he set up on the starting lineup and was one of the guys on the wing, we knew we maybe get 5 or 10 minutes of interesting play from him, and
then gone. No, you're right. Like, we had definitely high expectations from him. Ultimately, it's up to Ottolini and or Spores and or Gilardino to say, are we going to be waiting for him and see what he's going to do next year, or send them back to Venezia, or send them somewhere else.
Right.
The market is there, so it's not that we cannot place him. Last 3, Goodmanson.
have to keep.
lots of rumors to be he being sent here, sent there. Salernitana, sorry, Salernitana, no, but Sassuolo has been putting up. Apparently, I'm just quoting certain newspapers. Sassuolo has been putting up this offer that it's irresistible. I'm like, no, please. Sassuolo is like similar to us. At the very least, they're going to do focusing on talent to bring up and to be sold. So definitely they're not going to be putting up like a X number amount of millions of euros in order to catch him. So I highly doubt it. So it's almost like, what are you talking about? Right. Second last, Puskas. Puskas, last rumors from the, again, newspapers we were reading was the fact that because his team that got relegated to third division, apparently instead of the 4 million buyback option, that we might be getting him for 1.8. And apparently we have exercised that right based on that factor. Now, having said that, that does not mean that we're going to keep him. That does not mean that we're going to be able to loan him out. But is he still a good option for Serie A as a second/third option for striker? Hey, listen, we're hungry for that area, and we can talk about in 2-3 episodes about it. Definitely.
Yeah.
Last but not least, Ekuban.
I mean, I'm definitely in the pro Ekuban side of things. I think that he obviously had a kind of challenging season last year, having to come back from injury. I believe still he has many qualities that will be useful in Serie A. I like the fact that we don't have many players with his exact profile. He has a very, obviously, physical nature about him, and he's also very fast. And I think at the very least, if you're thinking about a change in dynamic, let's pretend we have Coda or a similar player in Coda's mold leading the line. If you place an Ekuban in a similar position later in the match, that's a different ask that you're having the defenders respond to. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of like him. I know not everybody feels that way.
No, you're right. And as we were team Hefty, we're definitely team Ekuban.
This is true. Also.
Most of the people are not. Especially on the Genuani Siresta group, I know they are not, and I'm not going against them. I'm just saying they are the example of the majority out there.
Right.
And I think that you don't necessarily only count a striker as the goals that they make, but also as the quality and then not quality of the player, but whatever they can bring up there to the front. And I think that if we haven't had Ekuban up front, we would have lost a lot of goals that we had.
Yeah, I mean, he makes the defense react. There's a lot of different things that happen from it. Absolutely.
Having said this, we are at a wrap. This was supposed to be like a 20-minute thing, and it's like I'm looking at the timer. I'm like,
I feel massively.
Anyways, so as we always say, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook on our social media. Drop us a like, send us a comments, send us a direct message for that matter. But always, never forget.
Forza Genoa.
You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genuani Siresta. Thank you for listening and see you next week.